Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 extends ban on domestic and international flights as its NCDC announces 195 new cases of COVID-19.
Nigerians are yet to come to terms with the deadliness and the virulent nature of the COVID-19.
Speaker, House of Representatives inspects this day Dole Isolation Center in Abuja and commends efforts to assist government.
Federal government approves 2 months license fee waiver for terrestrial broadcast stations in the country.
There's no doubt that we need a collective and government-supported approach in dealing with immediate, short and long-term palliative and initiatives.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we return to a conversation on COVID-19 situation reports from the states.
For the past 4 weeks on Good Morning Nigeria, precisely on Thursdays since the 9th of April, we started a series of COVID-19 situation reports in the states. We have been linking up with guests across the country. The situation is even more dire now, as only 2 states out of the 36 states are currently coronavirus free. Just last week, we had guests from Cross River, Katsina, Kano, Bayelsa, Plateau, and the FCT.
Well, Kirian, you and I were on set on that occasion, and we linked up with Professor Isa Sadiq Abubakar, who is Director, Center for Infectious Disease Research at Bayo University in Kano, and is also a member of the Kano State Task Force on COVID-19. Now, he said that the situation in Kano called for concern and that the unexplained deaths were possibly COVID-19 related, even as the state government had adopted verbal autopsy. Professor Sadiq also recalled large turnout of elderly patients with respiratory and organ issues flooding the Amiru Kano Teaching Hospital and subsequently dying also in large numbers. But he added that the testing laboratory, which was closed after 3 of the scientists in there got infected with COVID-19, had been decontaminated and reopened.
Now, the Permanent Secretary, Katsina State Ministry of Health, Dr. Kabir Mustafa, who joined via Skype last week, said Katsina, which is recording steady rise in cases, cleared the air on the situation of deceased index case, whom he said did not travel to his hometown upon returning from Lagos with COVID-19, as speculated on social media. Kabir Mustafa also said that funds were raised immediately and 20 beds set up at the General Hospital, 13 beds at the Federal Medical Center, with another 160 beds at the IDP Center, each meant to have its own supply of oxygen and mobile ventilators, though only 10 ventilators were available as at when he joined us on the program last week.
Well, we also had on the program the Bayelsa State Governor, that's Senator Doye Diri. He said that upon the arrival of the index case in the state, the initial response was to immediately go into contact tracing as well as decontaminating the facility where the index case was kept. And of course, the index case was then taken in for treatment, plus a 1-week lockdown that was then imposed on the state. The governor admitted that some persons in the state were still in denial about the existence of COVID-19, indicating that the government had gone into massive public enlightenment, plus fumigating the biggest market in the state capital, Yenagoa.
Now, the coordinator, Plateau State COVID-19 Task Force team, Professor Danlade Aboy-Atu, presented the state's main strategy, which he said has been mainly preventive, with the establishment of 3 isolation centers with 12 new ventilators purchased to complement those already available. He said that the state was put on lockdown and interstate movements banned since the index case, which came in across state lines, even as the sensitization programs are ongoing to put everyone on alert.
Okay, now we also have the Commissioner for Health of Cross River, who is also chairs the State Committee on COVID-19, Dr. Betta Edu. She said that the state had managed to remain coronavirus-free because it embarked on sensitization campaigns as early as January. Plus, preventive measures such as screening at airports and other entry points into the state, along with no mask, no movement directive by the state government. Now, she said massive preventive measures were also in place to stop potential Cameroonian refugees, numbering their thousands, from getting into the state through the land borders. But that the status of the state remaining coronavirus-free would also indicate that the state will have to do a lot more, in addition to equipping 3 isolation centers.
I know she also said that the state government has been supplying the population with free masks. It's about 1 million every week.
Well, yeah, that's right. Being produced by the factory that I think the state government has, some garment factory that is utilized for that purpose.
And we also had Mohammed Kau, Acting Secretary, FCT Health and Human Services Secretariat, who was with us here in the studio, and he said that massive testing is ongoing in all the suburbs of the territory, and results show 90% of all confirmed cases of COVID-19 are in the municipal area counts, with 41% in the Mabushi area, while 15% are in Wuse. But he has forgotten that of Mpape, where actually the community infection started in the FCT.
That's right, and a number of other suburbs in the Abuja municipal area had also not been tested, and then the numbers brought into the net as at the time we're speaking. So we're going to, of course, take a look at what is happening in the FCT or what has happened in the past week, plus going over to Nasarawa State, which is a neighboring state to the Federal Capital Territory, plus Imo, Kirian. We also are going to have to take a look at Ibo to see what measures are being put in place and what challenges are arising in terms of the state response to COVID-19. It's on that note we'd like to welcome you to today's edition of Good Morning Nigeria. My name is Kingsley Osadolo.
And I am Kirian Umayo. Many thanks for joining us on this Thursday's edition of Good Morning Nigeria, broadcast live on the network service of the NTA. And we shall, as usual, bring you some other segments that will make part of the package, and that will include newspaper review, business, and others. For now, Abd Malik Adio will bring us highlights of the morning news. Hello, Abd Malik.
Hello, Kirian, and good morning, Kingsley. It's good to have you join us on the morning news. The Nigerian Center for Disease Control, NCDC, has announced 195 new cases of COVID-19 in the country, bringing the number of confirmed cases to 3,145. Of the 195 new cases, 82 are in Lagos, 30 in Kano, 19 in Zamfara, 18 in Sokoto, 10 in Borno, 9 in the Federal Capital Territory, 8 in Oyo, 5 in Kebbi and Gombe State, while 4 are in Ogun and in Katsina State. Kaduna and Adamawa have 1 each. 534 have been discharged so far, with 103 deaths. Now, the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 has extended the ban on all domestic and international flights for the next 4 weeks, despite the relaxation of the lockdown within the country. Chairman of the task force and secretary to the government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, at the daily briefing in Abuja expressed concerns over continued disregard for the presidential task force guideline by Nigerians.
Of the ease of lockdown phase indicate that Nigerians are yet to come to terms with the deadliness and the virulent nature of the COVID-19. Some of these areas of worries include increased level of interstate movements, unhygienic and ill-advised use and sharing of masks, especially multiple fittings.
We are clearly in community transmission phase, where much now depends on individual and collective behavior.
Now, health girls workers in Bauchi State have tested positive to the novel coronavirus as the number of confirmed cases increases to 80 in the state. Mahmoud Ibu Mohammed reports that the state has so far received 904 repatriated Almajiris.
challenge that we are going to have. Because of the explosion in Kano and Jigawa, the perceived challenge is that we are going to require more beds. We are going to require more spaces.
The increasing number of cases in Bauchi, we are having more workers now to be recruited, especially at the risk communication, surveillance activities, as well as case management.
Now, containing the spread of COVID-19 and managing those affected requires partnership of the public and private sector. The Speaker House of Representatives, Femi Gbajabiamila, during a visit to the This Day Dome Isolation Center in Abuja, gave a thumbs up to the combined effort of some organizations as they commit resources to assist government to overcome the pandemic.
Every player. This is not, there can't be any corporate social responsibility beyond this. And you have three groups of people who have deployed the use of their corporate social responsibility into the establishment of this place.
There's also an arrangement to give the health workers hotel around here where they can go when they leave rather than go home to mix and mingle with their family members.
Now, the federal government has approved a 2-month license fee waiver for terrestrial broadcast stations in the country. Information and Culture Minister Lai Mohammed announced this at a meeting with members of the Broadcasting Organization of Nigeria in Abuja.
On the industry.
Therefore, there's no doubt that we need a collective and government-supported approach in dealing with the immediate short and long-term palliatives and initiatives for the industry in order to mitigate the effect of the pandemic on the sector.
After the initial disinfection of public places, the Federal Ministry of Environment has issued certificate of decontamination to some ministries and agencies of government as well as private organizations to the Federal Capital Territory. The certification requires sustenance of health, social distancing, and other protocols to prevent contamination of the certified location.
Measures, the washing of hands, the social distancing, and everything else, and keeping track of people that will be visiting that premises.
COVID-19 has no cure. The only cure against COVID-19 is to make sure that you stay uninfected. We must all observe personal hygiene, right? We must keep to the social distancing advisory, right? We must avoid crowded environments. It is the responsibility of each and every single Nigerian to make sure that the war against COVID-19 is successfully executed.
And 12 Nigerians have been intercepted by a combined team of Nigeria Immigration Operations and the Nigeria Navy Forward Operation Base at Ibaka, Akwa Ibom State. The statement by the Nigeria Immigration Service Public Relations Officer, DCI Sunday James, indicates that the 12 adults were apprehended in a boat heading to Cameroon. They were subsequently profiled by the Nigeria Immigration Service and health officials invited to check and certify them fit to return to their homes, having been refused departure on the basis of border closure by the federal government. Meanwhile, 256 Nigerians among those stranded abroad due to the global lockdown occasioned by the coronavirus have arrived at the international wing of the Muritala Mohammed Airport, Lagos, on board Emirate Airline. The returnees passed through thorough screening by the officials of the NCDC to determine their state of health before leaving the terminal to identify their luggage and join a stationed luxury bus conveying them to designated hotel. The evacuees will undergo a mandatory 14-day quarantine process before being permitted to join their families. And that concludes the news this morning, and we'll join Kingsley and Kieran after the break.
All right, you're welcome back, and I still Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. It's time for business news, with experts advising support for short-term economic recovery and improved social safety net, plus broad-based addition to enable a comeback from the coronavirus pandemic. Let's join Comfort Amudu for details of these and other financial reports.
Amaka dey sweet before, but this coronavirus now make scatter everything.
With the new normal, it's no longer business as usual, as the COVID-19 pandemic has continued to test African countries on multiple fronts, from health to economic devastation and low demand for crude, as well as sharp fall of oil prices. Despite the gradual relaxation of lockdown order across the globe, COVID-19 has forced major companies and businesses around the globe to rely basically on technology to function, whether they're using it to hold virtual meetings or monitoring vital assets. This technological solution is believed to help sustain businesses as well as develop ways to make a comeback after the pandemic. How will this shape the future of businesses in Nigeria?
I believe that we should all brace up because users will get used to realizing that a lot of things don't have to be done with physical interaction. So for us as an online business, we're excited at the future, what the future looks like. We've just been able to prove to users now on a different level the importance of marketplaces like ours, e-commerce businesses, delivery-based businesses. I believe going forward, this would be very important for a lot of people as they now rely on digital products.
With that, financial experts suggest that African countries should develop fair, balanced local content policies that create economic and educational opportunities for Africans in order not to discourage foreign investors from operating in the region.
Every country has a sort of negative impact of this on investment climate. But you see, a good thing about this thing is this, which I'm hearing from government. Government on its own is cutting down expenses, trying to realign the MDAs, ministry, department, and agencies, so that the revision in the budgetary position in line with the reality of the oil, which was initially 50-something naira per dollar, has been cut down. Second time, it's now 20. So which means government is aware that they have to do something. And if they do that, that means less revenue will be available for spending. That means both the executive and the parliament and every organs of the government must be ready to slash their budget. Everybody must be ready to adjust. So once we are ready to adjust, and then we actually put stimulus packages to the productive sector of the economy, we shall come out of it.
And investors made a mark on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange by gaining 174.09 billion naira, which firmed up the all-share index by 1.40%, closing above 24,000 basis points. With business news, Comfort Amudu.
And we thank you, Comfort, for that package. We appreciate that. Up ahead is our newspaper review segment.
Our newspaper reviewer, Bayo Tebe, is right here with us in the studios. Bayo, good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Kinsley. Good morning. Good morning, King.
Yeah, welcome,
Good
Bayo.
morning, Nigeria. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, let's begin with the leadership newspaper. Leadership newspaper, below the name flag, says Nigeria extends flight ban as airlines lose 17 billion naira monthly. And it has a rider, 260 Nigerians evacuated from UAE arrived Lagos. Military neutralizes 343 terrorists and 153 bandits. That's inside at page 24. The latest story, of course, is on COVID-19. And it states, despite scary statistics, Nigerians still carefree about COVID-19, and that's attributed to the federal government. Expresses concern over rising health workers' infection. Medical union seeks speedy training of members. And President Buhari prays for Emir of Daura's recovery. No apology over chloroquine recommendation. That's according to the Bauchi governor. Mystery deaths not connected to coronavirus, says Jigawa government. We are investigating alleged mass deaths. That's Yobe government. And ICPC releases guidelines for monitoring COVID-19 funds. And Dangote Foundation donates 1.5 billion naira to Nigeria UN COVID Basket Fund. And then also there beside the photograph, another $319 million Abuja assets in France and UK, says US. And then right at the foot of the front page, Buhari names ex-Inspector General of Police Abba chairman of Police Trust Fund. ASU protests non-release of withheld salaries. And federal government grants license fee waiver to broadcast stations. Okay.
All right, let's turn to the Daily Sun newspaper. Daily Sun, just beside the nameplate of the Daily Sun, the troops killed 343 terrorists and 153 bandits in 2 months. Now below the nameplate, federal government extends flight ban by 4 weeks. Reps, domestic airlines protest use of foreign airliners for evacuation. The story is fully captured on pages 6 and 25. Now the photo story you will see on the Daily Sun front page is that of Nigerians who thronged to the banks in Ikeja yesterday to withdraw money, and of course social distancing is ignored. Now youths protest killing of 7 vigilantes, 8 others in Niger State. That's on page 4. We will go all out for 2023 presidency, says Ohanes, denies appointing any lobbyist. Page 27 is where the story is in details. Now, COVID-19, Katsina Emir hospitalized. Government shuts 2 more local government areas. That's all in Katsina. It's on page 8. Now, federal government slashes projected revenue oil earning from 3 trillion to 1 trillion, but I think there is an error there. He said oil earning to 3 trillion and 1.3 trillion is a little error there. Project 3.5% drops in GDP, slashes oil production costs to $28 per barrel. Coronavirus, 90,000 health workers infected worldwide. That's on page 6. Let's bring in Bio.
Can I start by correcting the impression that an emir in Katsina that is hospitalized is the emir of Daura? There is an emir in Katsina, and so he's not the one hospitalized, in case the impression is given that he's the one hospitalized. 265 of our compatriots arrived from United Arab Emirates yesterday. They arrived 4.5 hours late. This is because the airline that was taking them had to do a detour when a woman on board went into labor. The woman has delivered, mother and baby are said to be fine. Another batch is expected from United Kingdom, but the Honorable Minister for Foreign Affairs has indicated there are 1 or 2 problems still waiting to be clarified. All things being equal, the group from the United States are expected to find their way home to Nigeria by Monday. There's that aspect that you read concerning airline protesting that they are not being engaged. The Foreign Affairs Minister has clarified that, for instance, those who came from United Arab Emirates, the Emirates had made arrangements to evacuate foreigners on their own. So it was at a little or no cost to have the Nigerians there. The problem they are having now would evacuate from United Kingdom has to do with issues of cost with the British Airways. And he also clarified that there were bidding processes that have been put across. And don't also forget that this is supposed to be at the cost of persons who have been evacuated. And many of them are down in resources and may not be able, on their own, yes, and may not be able to afford the kind of cost. And so government has to be a little bit diplomatic and see how they can manage their resources in getting. They have a responsibility to help Nigerians to come back home.
I hope they have extended that to China, you know, where we have records of molestations of Nigerians and even other African nationals.
For now, the 4,000 that were indicated are mentioned for the United Arab Emirates, which will be from the Middle East, United Kingdom, and the USA. Maybe later, the later batch, those ones will come there. Now,
I'm just wondering,
yes,
who, in the circumstance that we are discussing, who should have the right of first refusal to evacuate Nigerians wherever they are abroad? We have seen instances in the past, not just COVID-19, instances in the past, you know, where there was a situation that led to tourists or other persons being stranded. And such countries, particularly advanced countries, will send their own airlines, you know, to go pick up those persons, whether they are tourists or whatever. So, fine, we do not have a national carrier, but we have airlines in Nigeria. And some of the airlines here, particularly Air Peace, had also been contracted to bring in supplies, I think, from China or so. They have 777. So, and then you have other airlines, you know, who also have wide-bodied aircraft. So the question is, I mean, we don't have the details of the transactions that went on. It's who should have the right of first refusal before you start talking about open bidding. That right of that bidding should be internal, yes. And when there is no competence or capability internally, that before you start going outside.
Because, you know, aviation is an international business, right? So if there is a bidding, Nigerians who are in the business should be able to have opportunity of bidding as well as an international business enclave, you know, because the industry is highly professionalized, right? So you don't have to go and bid when you don't have the capability, you know, or the capacity to actually engage in that. China, for instance, is a distance, you know. I mean, for you to make that, you have to be prepared. Recall that the minister clarified some issues with respect to UAE, where the airlines by themselves were determined, you know, to assist in terms of bringing back Nigerians.
Well, that's something to also worry about. We're talking about the UK now. We do know, for instance, that before the ban on flights, whether domestic or cross-border, that some of those airlines charged extortionate fares from Europe, you know, to Nigeria, or from Nigeria to Europe. It's clear about that. So, as the same airlines were now going to patronize, you know, considering the fare disparity that they normally would charge versus, for instance, if they are flying across the Atlantic or they are flying, you know, within Europe itself, whether from west to east. I don't know.
In instances where there's going to be a bidding, the opportunity is given to a reasonable cost at fair services. So certainly, the cost will be a determining factor when it comes to the bidding. But be that as it may, for the updates on the COVID-19, as at yesterday, 195 new cases have been recorded. 19 cases were registered in 13 states. So far, a total of 3,145 of our compatriots have tested positive. 82 were in Lagos, 30 Kano, Zamfara 19, Sokoto 16, Borno has 10, and FCT 8. So far, 534 have been discharged, and we have 2,611 active cases. Unfortunately, we lost 5 of our compatriots again, bringing our total loss to 103. So far, we are not doing too badly, but we can do very badly if we are not careful. Our death rate is now about 103. Our daily, at least what we had yesterday, was 195. If you compare to what Russia had yesterday, over 10,000 in one day. But if we are not careful, we could get to those places with community transmission that is ongoing. And this is why interstate, the Presidential Task Force has harped on the fact that the disregard on the ban on interstate movement, as well as other guidelines for lockdown, portends great danger. Post Mustafa decried the concealment of passengers among foodstuffs the unhygienic sharing of face masks, and congregation at banks, which is now becoming an order of the day, as well as traffic gridlock at metropolitan areas. You know, people were tense, they were locked in, and the moment partial lifting of the lockdown was done, everybody is jumping out.
You see,
that becomes a danger.
Yes, I'm more concerned about the banks, because some banks have closed some branches. You know, now creating a kind of a rush to the very few ones that are open. And when you go to those banks, you see people convert as if it's a marketplace. Nobody is even thinking about distancing, because of course you don't have money in your pocket, then you have not started. So that's an aspect that is very, very important, because if you close down some branches, people will converge on the few ones that are open. Now, and some banks have also reduced the number of staff that they have, even the branches that are open. They should allow their staff to come and work, because it will reduce convergence of people in different banks. If you go out, it's like a market. Just try, move around. It's like a marketplace. People converge, no distancing and what have you. It presents a lot of danger. Another aspect, is the issue of interstate travels that are on. In fact, we should hold some security agencies responsible for that, because if they do their job well, the possibility of people, crossing to other states will not be there. Although they have done well in recent past, because some people have been seen concealing human beings in the lorries that are carrying cows or food items and what have you. And the interstate crossing is very bitter, and it is adding fuel to the very already inflamed situation, because as it is now, we are climbing every day.
Yes. You see, with the interstate travel is a problem. First, there's concern about security, there's suspicion about compromise. However, some of the transporters are expert on the route. For instance, there is a truck that came in with domestic persons as well as their animals from Niger State. How did they get to Abuja? They used footpaths and avoided all security until they got to Abuja and they were found. And the task force had to send them back to Niger State. Sometimes, because this is their business, they know the illegal footpaths they use to beat the security. But be that as it may, Ekiti has taken a critical position. There is a lady who left Katsina and came to Ekiti to visit the husband. Unfortunately, she is positive. The husband reported, and she has been taken into isolation. The husband too has been advised to self-isolate. But the Ekiti state government is saying that she will be prosecuted for violating the interstate ban law.
How much enlightenment or sensitization have the security agents received, particularly those who are manning the border points or manning the boundaries between states? Because the commonest story is that, fine, I mean, if you, say in Abuja, for instance, if you went to Gwagwalada, you could live there before the crack of dawn, and then they will spirit you from Abuja, through Kogi or wherever you were going. And you have free passage, provided, the driver, knows what to do. But it does appear that some of the security agencies do not yet have an appreciation of what's playing out. They just think that this is just business as usual, that a roadblock or a checkpoint has been mounted, and then, you continue with what's going on. They don't seem to recognize that, and I think that it's important that all those who are involved in enforcing the regulations relating to COVID-19, have proper briefing, because it is not the 50 naira, I don't know how much they collect, that you take from motorists and other passengers, that could actually be an invitation, to some serious health issue, and for the rest of us as well. But I don't see why it's difficult for people to just obey the simple regulations. They say no interstate movement. You sit down. If you are going to transact a business with another person in another state, and the person is aware that there is this force majeure, that you can't fly and you can't come by road, and the business has to wait.
And the worst of it all is that we are not safe. All of us are not safe. If those things are happening freely along the borders, some of us who are here in Abuja are thinking that you are safe, you are not. Because invariably, for you to exist within a society, you have to interact one way or another. You have to interact. There must be need for that. And where that happens, Of course, we just pray to God. That's what's next. Let's go to
COVID-19 is not mobile, so it depends on people to move them.
People's movement. Yes, that means where it goes.
Another issue that has come up is the issue of Almajiri. Governor El-Rufai is on record to have said that the recent movement of Almajiri across state is a consequence of the decision of Northern Governors Forum taken about 2 weeks ago. And he says categorically from Kaduna, he had repatriated about 3,000 to other states. And he is very happy to welcome any Almajiri that is of Kaduna State indigenous. Yes.
Now, editorial says, in defense of our female children, that's the pilot newspaper, in defense of our female children. Bayo, come in here briefly.
Yes, briefly, it is about female genital mutilation. And the editorial is citing this instance that there are about 200 million girls who are affected worldwide, and this is very worrying, and they abound in 30 countries. Girls are subjected to this before age of 5. For us here in Africa, it is higher in Djibouti as well as Ethiopia. Unfortunately, we have the practice also in Nigeria. It is culturally believed that it will stem promiscuity, and also even in some cultures they have to celebrate that as process of growing, and therefore they are happen on the need for serious advocacy to traditional rulers, religious leaders, to make sure that it is stemmed to meet the target of 2030, which the UN has set to eliminate FGM.
All right, Baya Tebe, thank you very much for being around. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Thank you too.
Okay, it's Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you on the network service of the NTA. We're taking a break now. When we return, we'll get into our discussion proper. Silenced.
All right, the program is Good Morning Nigeria, and to establish the mood for our topic this morning on COVID-19 situation reports in the states. Let's take excerpts of last week's discussion on part 4 in this series put together by Oyeyemi Ajayi.
The issue with COVID has to do with a lot of behavioral changes, and by virtue of the culture and the religious belief around the area, you have to actually do a lot of education for the people to understand.
Our response immediately was to ensure that we went into contact tracing and to decontaminate the facility where this lady was kept and receiving treatment. Thereafter, we also imposed a 1-week lockdown and curfew from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. And that is being observed throughout the state.
My governor was the first in Nigeria to say, no mask, no movement. If you don't use a mask, you cannot move. All of these preventive measures were put in place by our state and even more.
For us, I think we are at the cruising level. We have stabilized, not in terms of number, because the number is still rising, but we have gotten to communities. We are testing massively. We are getting results from the communities. We have enough beds for those that would be infected. Almost all our centers are ready. We have also decided to give the communities masks to wear should they come out and interact with others, because with the confirmation of the community infection or transmission, then you need to do something about that.
Definitely, with the rising number of deaths recorded in Kano, the state has instituted a measure to account for every single death, and especially with the coming of the federal government team, a lot of work will be done in this direction. So in the near future, we will definitely have to record all the deaths with laboratory results concerning COVID-19 and other diseases that might be implicated as causes of this, so that we will arrive at definitive diagnosis before or even after a person has died.
We had so far purchased 12 ventilators and distributed to them,
and just to add to the work they had already. And other compressors and other facilities have been purchased, and BPE equipments. Now, these are put in place so that we become ready in case of this spread hits us.
All right, now those were excerpts from our last edition of Situation Reports from the States. Today, of course, we're also having guests with us here in the studios, and then two other guests joining us via Skype this morning. First, let's go over to Lafia, which is the capital of Nasarawa State, where we're now being joined by the Executive Governor of the state, His Excellency Engineer Abdullahi Sule. Your Excellency, a pleasure to have you with us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Pleasure to be here again. Thank you very much. Good morning.
Okay, and also joining us via Skype from Owerri, that's the capital of Imo State, is Professor Maurice Iwu. Professor Maurice Iwu, of course, is a professor in one of the disciplines in pharmacy, and is currently chairman of the Imo State Task Force on COVID-19. Professor Iwu, pleasure to have you with us on the program this morning.
Good morning.
And seated with us here in the studio is Ata Iharo, Chairman, FCT Task Force on COVID-19. It's a pleasure to have you this morning.
Thank you very much. A wonderful morning being with the NTA family.
All right. And we also have Professor Olufemi Babalola, President, Guild of Medical Directors or Medical Doctors. It is a pleasure also to have you here in the studio.
Thank you very much indeed.
All right. Once again, gentlemen, delight to have you. Let's begin with His Excellency, the Governor of Nasarawa State. Your Excellency, we had you here in our studios a little over 2 weeks or so ago, and you did indicate that on account of what was happening in and around your state, which at the time had not recorded any incident of COVID-19, you were taking a number of proactive steps. But here we are, Nasarawa already has recorded not just a case, but unfortunately, you've also seen a fatality. So exactly what is happening in your state now, and how are you responding?
Well, thank you very much. When I appeared on the program, actually about 2 weeks ago, if you remember, one of the things I mentioned to you, a few days earlier than that, the Nasarawa had 0 cases. It was one of the 3 or 4 states that had 0 reports. But I told you that because of our proximity to the federal capital, Abuja, that I was always scared of what was going to happen in Nasarawa, because you have a lot of people actually working in Abuja but live in Nasarawa. And some of these people definitely will come one way or the other in contact with some infected people, and then they will bring back to Nasarawa State. So that's one of the reasons why we lost Karu, which is the
there's some freeze on the connection from Lafia, where the governor is with us. I don't know if we have any indication from our director and engineers whether the line is cleared up. We can return to him. Okay, now we understand that they try to clear that up. Can we go over to Owerri, where we also have Professor Maurice Iwu? Professor Maurice Iwu, Chairman Imo State Task Force on COVID-19. What is it that is happening in Imo with regards to the coronavirus?
We have, good morning, we have 2 confirmed cases in Imo State, and luckily we already had prepared isolation center here in Owerri and 4 others in the various parts of the state. We are still lucky that we just have 2 cases, but we are prepared just in case there is a sudden spike in the numbers, so that we can then have them placed in isolation stroke treatment centers. We are lucky the state teaching hospital are just about opening 100 beds units that will also help in that whole effort.
All right, Professor Wu, thank you. We'll come back to you much later. in the program. Let's return to Nasarawa once more. We seem to have reconnected with the governor of that state. Your Excellency, you were already explaining some of the actions you have taken to contain the spread of the virus, which of course, as rightly pointed out 2 weeks ago when you came, you had no case. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so as at the time, as I told you, we had almost like no cases because we only had one case. But now, Nasarawa does not, as at yesterday, we had 12 cases. In addition to that, we had one death. And one of those deaths is actually one of the VIPs that you can consider because he's a member of the House of Assembly. You know, that led us into shutting down the entire assembly, and we had to fumigate it, and we isolated all the other 23 members of the House of Assembly. We took their samples and tested. Now, the unfortunate thing about the death of the member was that when we saw the signs of COVID-19, you know, when he was admitted, we took his samples. But before the samples the results were returned, you know, then he died. And so there was confusion about how he would be buried. So a lot of people actually, even though people were being informed, but a lot of people were fully not aware. So a lot of people appeared, you know, during his wedding, and some people gave him the burial bed and the rest of that, you know. So now we had 74 contacts as a result of that. And they are all also, we have locked down it from yesterday, we locked down Nasarawa town, which happens to be the capital of the local government, you know, where he comes from. And then we took samples of all members of his family and so many other people. But then we have a lot of returnees, which is another problem that we have. We have a lot of returnees, and I was listening to the program earlier. Sometimes the people go through all kinds of ways until they get in. And then we have returnees from Lagos and returnees also from Kano. So in fact, it's among the returnees that we found some of these 12 cases that you have. And as a result of that, you know, we have to make preparations. So we now have isolation centers and we have holding centers. Then we have compounded the issue with the issue of the Al-Bajiri, which all the northern governors collectively took the decision, which I still believe was a wonderful decision that has been taken. So we have another, you know, holding center for the Al-Majiris. You know, as at yesterday, you know, we had almost 100 Al-Majiris, which we received from Bauchi State. You know, sometimes unofficial, because sometimes these Al-Majiris, when the moment they hear that they are being transported, they want to go on their own. You know, and they come. And so we received them. Over the 100 that we received from Bauchi were not even an official manner from Bauchi state government. Rather, they came on their own. But we couldn't take any risk. You know, we decided to also, because yesterday you had El-Rufai indicating that out of the over 140 Al-Majiris he received, a huge number of them were actually infected. You know, so for that reason, we don't take chances. So these are the compounding problems. Now we have relaxed the lockdown in Abuja. By that, you know, it means that we have to be more on our feet. You know, so we go ahead and ensure that we take more precautionary measures, more preventive measures, you know, but we have to relax also our camp because you have hundreds of people going to work in the morning, hundreds of people returning from Abuja to work. So it makes our work even more difficult. But again, I mean, this is a very, very difficult period. When you lock down people, it's a very difficult period as a leader, you know, to try and manage the people. Especially when you receive people, we know about the social gathering, they can't go to their prayers. It's during a month like Ramadan, it makes it again more difficult. So you can imagine what the governors are going through at the moment, and in fact, what the federal government also is going through.
But Your Excellency, let's remain with you for a while. You just raised a very pertinent issue now concerning the Almajiris who have also been sent back to their state of origin, which is your state. And you will agree with me that handling the Almajiris is very dicey, you know, in this circumstance, you know, because of their number and of course their age. Some are children, some are below 15 or 10, as the case may be. And now also think of the suburbs of Abuja that are part of Nasarawa, talking about Jikoi, Masaka, Nyanya, Maraba, and what have you. And 2 weeks ago when you were here, you were so worried or concerned about that population, which of course will have a lot to do with Abuja city center, because some staff of different establishments in Abuja reside in those areas. So what extra effort are you making? Because from what you have noted, you need to go the extra mile to see what you can do to ensure that it does not spread further.
Yeah, well, let me start with the Almajiri. In fact, between the Almajiris is trying to look at two terribly bad situations, and you have to take one. So transporting the Almajiris from other states to their home states was a very, very difficult decision to make. We try as much as possible to make it as comfortable as possible, providing, while taking samples of some of them. You can take all the over 4,000 Almajiris below the ages of 10. Some of them were between 7, 8, 9, less than 10 years old. Sometimes when you see them, one of our traditional rulers, who came to help me see them off, actually was shedding tears, because it's so difficult when you have children like that and they don't have the love of their own parents. It was a very difficult situation. But as a leader, sometimes you have to take some of these very drastic, very difficult situations. So you have a situation of exposing them to the condition they are now. Some of them sleeping outside, like in Kano, some of them sleeping under the bridges. In Lagos, where I lived, for most of my working life, you see them under the bridges, under all kinds of conditions. So either you continue to keep them that way and exposing them more to COVID-19, at a higher risk, or you move them back to their home state so that they can be taken to their parents, and we chose the later. And that's what happened with what the governors have done, so we gave them air-conditioned buses to transport them. We did all that and the rest of that. So that's the tune of the Almajiris. And we're trying to make it compulsory also that the moment they go, while they are acquiring the Islamic education, which is where the name Almajiri comes from, they also go ahead and acquire Western education to help for their own future. So that's the decision of the northern governors when it comes to the Almajiri. Now, on the Abuja that you mentioned, that is now unlocked, so we are now trying to go from street to street, increasing the number of sample-taking centers, so that we try to do that. We maintain the closure of the shops, closure of schools, closure of all the markets, social distancing. We continue to do that at the borders. We continue also to monitor the kind of people that come in and the rest of that. Those are the only things we can do at the moment. But the centers are also getting congested. For instance, we have over 100 samples that we have sent for a couple of days now. We have not been able to get the results yet. So that's why when I hear some people say that NCDC is waiting for samples, they are running out of samples, I get a little bit confused, because otherwise we will have been able to get all the results. I'm getting a lot of pressure from the members of House of Assembly. Samples were taken over 3 days ago. We are not getting the results yet. But again, really, if you look at them, you have to press them, because they are overwhelmed. They are going through a lot of testing, and the nature of the test, as I understand, is a very vigorous, intensive test that the doctors are going through. I'm an engineer. I don't know much about that. So those are the kind of things that we are doing.
All right. Thank you very much. Your Excellency, will return to you in the course of the conversation. Let's come back now to our Abuja studios. And the chairman of the FCT Task Force on COVID-19, Atai Haru, was introduced earlier. But tell us what exactly is playing out in the Federal Capital Territory. Today is day 4 of the easing of the lockdown. So before the lockdown, what happened? And now that we're having to relax the lockdown, what is it that your task force is seeing?
I think in all our operations here, which I would say clearly is under the supervision of the FCT Police Commissioner Bala Chiroma, who reports directly to the FCT Minister Malam Mohammed Musa Bello, we've seen some sort of metamorphosis going forward here. From when we commenced the operation, at the commencement point here, we had to deal with some organizations, some religious organizations, the mosques, the churches are not complying. Many of them comply, but few were not complying. We had to put them in shape here. Thereafter, we move on to other aspects of managing markets. Thereafter, we move on to having market days. Thereafter, we move on. Even at the moment now, we are struggling with interstate traveling, which I think we are saying in very large and very troublesome manner. Yesterday alone, we got about 67 commercial motorcycles coming in with their motorcycles from different parts of the country. We got about 53 also coming in from Katsina. We got, I think, about 4 coming for. So the numbers will not be so accurate now, but 4 coming in from Kano, some from Kaduna, some are anyway bound to Nasarawa State, some to Abuja here. Then we got about 4 also from Lagos who have spent about 4 days on the way. The night before yesterday, we were around at night at the AYA where we pin, and some of my team members here, we saw so many persons coming in from Benue State who have traversed Nasarawa State despite the border. Despite the interstate restrictions here, we saw some other ones as well who had come in from Jos, traversing through Nasarawa State, traversing Plateau, Nasarawa, and coming through to Abuja. We saw some other ones as well who are from Kano going back to Kano, and that leaves us with several questions of if actually we are obeying the orders of the President and Commander-in-Chief, who have said there should be no interstate movement here. Also within the FCT, we are also trying to ensure that we enforce compliance in diverse manner. The issue of the bus capacity, carrying capacity of taxis, of vehicles, we look at that one. We look at the issue of the face mask, which we try to talk to people to. When we go to market, social distancing is one other issue we also try to. The FCT Minister, Malam Mohammed Musa Bello, had also tried to create some 40 neighborhood markets, which the Abuja Market Management Limited under Mr. Farouk is working on. Also at the market, we also try to decongest the informal sector, because for now, our markets are just 2 days, Wednesdays and Saturday, and we are only allowing those who sell foods, provision, and farm and drugs to actually operate. But we observe that the informal sector in a large market like Wuse, Gariki, Utaku, even Yayan, others are largely one small place of not more than 2,000 square meters. So we are trying to disperse them, to spread them across the entire market so that we won't have crowd clogging in one particular point. So by and large here, it's one very lot of operation here that have left many persons, even the Commissioner of Police, are a lot worried, because when you see vehicles that ought not to be, like yesterday, we have vehicles coming in from Ondo State, some from Katsina, some from Kano, and you just stop them almost at the city gate. You are asking questions, how did they even leave Kano? One we saw that left Karanamuda. We asked the man, how did you even cross Guso? How did you even cross the area of that market, Kaswandaji, cross Funtua, through Zaria, and get to Abuja? We thought we are all together in this border closure, but
let us pause it for a while here and still remain with you with respect to the actual management of the easing of lockdown in Abuja, for instance. Even before that, it's common knowledge, in Abuja here that the suburbans, they seem not to be part of Abuja in the first place, because if you go there, it's business as usual, right? If you go to, well, Maraba, you could say it's part of Nasarawa, but it's also part of the suburbs of Abuja. Then if you talk about Gwagwa area, Dusa, Alhaji, and what have you, it does seem that people are not even adhering to distancing, and that brings us to the issue of sensitization. How much of this have you engaged yourself with, because even in Abuja here, people are still in denial of whether this thing exists or not. So what is your task force doing to perhaps re-educate Abuja residents, on this, especially those in the suburban areas?
Yes, I think at the point when we commenced, we all understand how it played out nationally, not just in Abuja. Many sees COVID-19 as one problem tied to the elites, the bourgeois and the petit bourgeois, and not the masses. So it took time for us to actually go around, talk to them. The FCT Minister, Mohammed Musa Bello, and the one I worked directly with, the Commissioner of Police, Balachi Roma, told us, let's mix enforcement and advocacy. And also when you go around the suburbs, areas like within the stretch from Yanyan through Karo, through Jukwe, through Pegi, Kurudu, Gidandaya, Gidamanguru, down to Karishi, on that stretch, you go to Duse Alhaji, Duse Makaranta, you go to Jigo, Buari, on that stretch, you even go to Kuje, Pegi, you find persons really not largely believing that it is real, because at that time it was basically the names you hear are the big names, some big governors, some big persons in Meitama who say it hasn't got to the community level then, but now it has gotten there. And what we must also appreciate in all the neighborhood across, the poor neighborhood across the country, most houses are not as comfortable as the ones in the city. Some persons I met, particularly at Mpape, took me to their house and told me they can't stay there. Made up of zinc sheet, no ceiling, from 9:10, it's no longer habitable. Excessively very hot. One guy told me he needs to come out before he dies of meningitis while trying to stay indoor against COVID-19. I think in all of this, we try talking to people, trying to sensitize them. Most time we even go to the churches. That's why we told people when we go to churches, we go to mosques. At the early stage, we were telling them, you can't be doing this. Even when we need to even take some of those clerics to actually face the mobile court, we had to address the congregants and tell them clearly that what you are doing is not good for you. You find most of those videos were aired by the NTA, and you find persons actually faulting us for going to talk to men of God. But we also felt that within the context that those who are custodians and enforcers of divine law must find it easy to actually conform to mortal laws when this laws does not prohibit them from exhibiting their faith. So when you go around talking to people, we've done that so much. We are still doing that. Even some days ago, we stopped over at the Outer Northern Expressway, the Kubwa Road. We had to stop people in buses. We saw so many buses with people standing. And we're wondering what's really going on here. We had to stop them first, talk to them, then we drop the passengers, call the drivers, give them back their money. We take the women who are vulnerable and the children and put that half capacity of the vehicle, because we ought to take that driver to the mobile court, but we need to bring in human face and human understanding that we need to allow the women go to where they are going to and the men should actually come. I think largely we are talking, but the talking we are talking is we are coming from a point where we had a perception that this was elitist. Even till now, I told some persons in NCDC and others that we may need to be showing videos and pictures on NTA and others, because it still looks like an illusion in the face of some persons who are not seeing these videos, these pictures. We need to get people from the NTA to go into these centers. Let us really see videos and pictures so that people will start to see that it is real. In some areas, some people tell you that it's not real. Even some pastors are already coming out to say it's not really. It's some. Okay, need to see videos and pictures.
Atai Karo, thank you very much for your elaborate explanation. We'll still have more questions for you. Let's now bring in the president of the Guild of Medical Directors, Professor Olufemi Babalola. Professor Babalola, we had you here in our studios several weeks ago. At that time, the numbers were still very small. Today, we are seeing the climb up in terms of number of infections, those who have also been discharged, and then the fatalities. Some of the key points that you canvassed on that occasion, along with the other medical doctor colleagues who were on the program, included the fact that the public facility, that's the public health facility, just might be inadequate, that you needed the support of private medical practitioners who ordinarily provide some 60% of healthcare, to Nigerians generally. So what have we seen in terms of caregivers in the course of the growth of coronavirus in our population?
Well, thank you very much. We will see that over the course of this epidemic, quite a number of private hospitals have been exposed, to patients who have COVID-19. This was the point I was making on that program that day, that whether we like it or not, private facilities will be exposed to COVID-19. And I was making the point on that program that government should make a deliberate effort to equip some private hospitals to be able to cope with COVID-19 cases. The reason being that many of our so-called big men would rather prefer to go to a private facility where they, maybe in their own estimation will have some kind of dignity that is appropriate to their status in society, than to go to a place, that is, open, a tent in a stadium or some other makeshift facility like that. As a matter of fact, if you look at the experience of the late, chief of staff, for instance, although there was some degree of secrecy or whatever in the place where he got his care, it eventuated that actually he was being treated in a private hospital. And there are many of our, citizens too, who, as we speak now, are being treated in private hospitals. Let's be frank with ourselves. So we should not shy away from the fact that there will be Nigerians who will prefer to be treated in private hospitals. And the thing is not to play the ostrich and pretend that it's not happening, but to actually face it and say, okay, private hospital ABCD in Abuja, we are going all out to equip you, to train you, to give you the PPEs that you need and so on and so forth, so that you are able better to cope with patients that may come your way. And I believe that this will go a long way in also assisting the government and to take some weight off the government in that particular regard.
Are you still advocating for this, or there is already some positive reaction in terms of supporting private healthcare facilities?
Yeah, there's been some positive reaction on the part of government since that program. I think there's now a realization. As a matter of fact, I was surprised to hear that the Lagos state government was fully aware of where the chief of staff was being treated, and it was part of their plan, actually, to have some private facilities. But I think more needs to be done, and a little bit of openness also needs to be there. There's no point saying that private facility is able to treat COVID patients and it's all a secret and people don't know exactly what is going on, because there are some people who will actually prefer that, secondly, let me even say that even when this policy is not there, every private facility is prone to being visited by COVID-19 patients. That is the simple truth. Any doctor that is seeing patients in Nigeria today is liable to come across COVID-19 patients at one time or the other. And what we have told all our members in the Guild of Medical Directors and even all private hospitals is that you must treat every patient that comes to your hospital as COVID-19 until proven otherwise. Because there are several COVID-19 patients that are asymptomatic. And we have always been advocating the use of rapid serological tests. We have a molecular test strategy in Nigeria to the almost total exclusion of serological rapid tests. And this is not right. Even in China, where this epidemic began, we see that they use rapid tests, which will give you results within 5 to 10, 15 minutes, depending on a particular test. And with that, it guides them, in the management of cases that are before them, before maybe molecular tests can be used to confirm whether these cases are true or not. I'm aware, of course, that people, the Minister of Health, and maybe the NCDC have always played down the use of rapid tests because they're not accurate. There's no test that is 100% accurate. That is the truth of the matter. And when you are, looking at the efficacy of any test, there are 2 or 3 things to talk about. You talk about the sensitivity of the test. In other words, to what extent can it detect the disease when it is there? You talk of the specificity of the test. In other words, to what extent can it rule out the test when it is not present? You talk of the positive predictive value and the negative predictive value. And there are some serology tests that have gone through these comparisons, and many of them have sensitivities in the range of 95%.
All right, Prof, I'm not cutting short because I want to remain with you. I want to have a clear understanding of the issue of equipping private health facilities, because over the years it's been believed that most private hospitals are better equipped than even the public ones. Are you looking for special equipment that has to do with COVID-19, such as BPE? Because I'm worried about testing, again, which you have just spoken about. If we equip private facilities, how is it going to help the greater public and not just the individuals who may wish to go there as big men or what have you? Because of course we know that the British Prime Minister was at the public hospital when he was hospitalized. So are we equipping these facilities because some men or some big men, as you put it, may like to go there? Or is it to bring kind of support to what the public facility can offer? Because the Minister of Health last week noted the fact that they are lacking space. and most of our private hospitals don't have even this space in the first place. So I want that clarification on the reasons for you wishing that private facilities are equipped. How many persons are they going to take in? What is the space they have, to be able to assist? Because we're not expecting any exponential level, but we are gradually advancing towards that.
Well, to be sure, I'm not saying that every private hospital should be equipped. Some of our members early on in this epidemic actually volunteered that, okay, we have the space. For instance, I know that Gariki Hospital, which is being run along the lines of a private public facility, we actually, and Dr. Ibrahim Wada, who is the one who runs, to Gariki Hospital, and who is a member of the Guild of Medical Directors, actually volunteered that we could use Gariki Hospital as, a spillover or an extension or whatever. Nobody seems to have, taken that matter seriously. And I know that there are some other hospitals, private hospitals as well, who are willing to, give a wing of their hospital or some space, to, assist the government in this particular. And that offer is still on the table as I speak. So I'm not saying that every private hospital should be equipped. Certainly not. But if a private hospital volunteers that we can help, then what the government should do is to then move in, equip the place, train the staff, and make the beds available.
I'm sorry, Prof. Yes. Very quickly, before we go to Professor, when you say government should move in, you talked about Lagos. Which government are you referring to now? Is it the federal government or the state government? Say here in the case of the FCT, are you referring to the FCT administration?
It could be, it depends on which jurisdictions we're talking about. In the FCT here, for instance, I expect both the federal government and the FCT, can work together in synergy. And I recall that I think it's in Edo State or one of the states in the south, where the state actually went out of its way to equip the private hospitals in their jurisdiction. They gave them PPE, they gave them, whatever they needed in terms of face masks and gloves and, protective equipment, etc., etc. And this has been proactive in relating to the private facilities in their jurisdiction. This is the kind of thing I'm advocating.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Obalala. So let's return to Owerri, where we earlier introduced Professor Morris Iwu via Skype. Professor Morris Iwu, 6 years ago when we had the Ebola crisis in Nigeria, you were a guest of Good Morning Nigeria here in our Abuja studios. Now, tell us something. You later became a member of a committee set up by the Federal Ministry of Health to work out some issues relating to effective management of Ebola, but not much was heard subsequently. What exactly are you reading between the Ebola outbreak and the COVID-19 pandemic, say, in our country? And secondly, in Imo State, you have two cases, as you said. Is this necessarily the calm before the storm? And if so, how prepared are you to face the storm?
Yeah, thank you. On the Ebola and coronavirus, actually there is a linkage there because both of them are viral infections. And luckily, when we were in the treatment research group of the Federal Ministry of Health, one of the things we did was to look at the inventory of compounds that are possible anti-Ebola compounds. And during that time, we didn't just screen for Ebola. We also went ahead to screen for other likely viruses. Coronavirus actually appeared first in 2003, 2004 as SARS coronavirus 1. And that is why technically it's referred to as COVID-2. Because it's actually a comeback of the same virus, but now mutated to something different. And what happened that 3 of the compounds that we tested at the time that were positive against Ebola, were also positive against dengue fever, and also positive against coronavirus, the SARS coronavirus. So what happened in that particular case is that we continued the work we contacted the National Institute of Health in the United States and said, look, go back to our inventory. There are 3 compounds that we tested with you at the time that we can now repurpose for this new virus. And they saw with us, and then we started testing them again. And that was when I now alerted the Federal Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Science and Technology, and because there was all likelihood that this was going to be a pandemic. At that time, we didn't have any case in Nigeria. But going by the way viruses of this kind behave, there's usually a W shape, a spike that comes after the log, and that was what happened. So we have 3 compounds that we tested, and then one of the good things that also happened was that we already had a tea that we formulated in 2016 that contained ingredients from the two active compounds. So it became necessary that we had to allow the federal ministry to say if there is a need for us to develop a post-exposure prophylactic agent, that here we have something, not necessarily for the treatment and the cure, but to protect especially healthcare personnel. There is a publication that even if you do all the social distancing, even if you wash your hands, that if you're in the healthcare profession where you have direct contact with the patient, there is a need to take antiviral agents. And what could be better than an antiviral that is based on a food substance that is not toxic? But on the issue of Imo, you captured it very well. We are really worried about the people coming back from Lagos and Kano and our neighboring states. So that our fear here is that there could be a surge. And while we are managing what we have now, we are using this period to prepare for a possible surge. And it's that possibility of a surge that really worries us. Luckily, again, the governor is seeing it as a war. So the entire state apparatus is being mobilized. Gradually, the citizenry, the people in the rural areas are beginning to buy in. We now have people phoning in, telling us that Mr. XYZ had just come back from a trip from Lagos or from Kano. What this us actually is, how do the people still travel at this time? But they do travel, they do come home. So the President Generals have a register where we monitor everybody that comes into the state, and within the 14-day period we give them, even if the time passes, we still record their movements and people that have made contacts with. Gradually, that message is passing. We do have a strategic goal, namely, we communicate very effectively as much as we can, we educate as much as we can, and then we protect the entire state. And the only way we can protect the state is also to be on top of our game by looking at the science. And then our doctors are, just like I had the chairman of this CMD talk about, our doctors are all exposed. So we're not taking the narrow view of the hospital setting. We're also involved in terms of what happens to the other doctors who are just, because most people, when they go to the hospitals, they don't really know what is wrong with them. The doctor who is going to attend to them may not even have idea what he's going to face. So we are looking at the whole thing from a holistic point of view. And we're also trying to do something pretty unique here. We are not focusing on creating new establishments like having the isolation centers in Stadia and so on. We are trying to effectively equip the existing institutions, because after COVID-19, there may be other viruses coming. So the emphasis here is to strengthen the capacity of the state to cope with such emerging diseases, because they are going to come, whether we like it or not. We are living in a tropical country to start with, and also we also have what is happening to our neighbors now. I'm talking about as far away as China. Whatever happens there may actually affect our own fortunes here. So what we are doing essentially is increase the education level, communicate as much as we can. That is where our Ministry of Information actually is the key. We are trying to use less of law enforcement, but more of education, and trying to get people to buy in, so that they will be able to know that the ultimate protection that they have is their own contribution. And so far it is working. But as you rightly pointed out, we are really having our fears all the time that there could be a surge. And how prepared are we? We've just opened a 100-bed additional unit when we only have 2 cases. Yes, we know. And we are also going to open many more. But they are within hospital setting, not in Stadia, not outside the system, but within the existing system. We're encouraging the government not to establish anything new, but to try to fortify and build enhanced capacity. The one at Olo, for example, we intend to use it as a full-fledged infectious disease unit. So that even when we don't have COVID-19, there will be other viral infections or even other infectious diseases that they can then use there. It could end up being a zonal center. We don't care, but the important thing that we have the capacity to deal with these issues, and that's the approach we're using, namely communicate, educate, and protect.
All right, thank you so much, Professor Wu, for that elaborate explanation. We'll return to you, definitely. But now, let's go back to Nasarawa, where we have the governor of that state. Your Excellency, you're already managing a very precarious situation, and going by the upward trajectory of this COVID-19, as Professor Wu just said, that we should be prepared for the worst. Now, going forward in Nasarawa State, what are the extra steps you are taking?
Well, just as I told you earlier, as far as we are concerned, we were preparing for the worst from day one. But with the more cases that we see coming up, we continue to prepare even more. For instance, apart from importing and now buying locally, roughly about 100,000 masks that we have at the moment, we are making it compulsory now, especially in places like Karu and Nasarawa town, Kefi, Lafia, and places like that. And we have started distributing them so that everybody will at least wear them. We continue, on the other hand, to do more education, more awareness. One of the things I think Professor Iwu has mentioned, which is correct, is about the local awareness, in the communities where we are. So if you go to some of the villages right now, they are the same people who are calling us to say that so and so person had just returned from Kano. We are bringing him to life here. So and so person has just returned from Lagos. We are bringing them to life here. And so they are helping us to do that. And all the local government channels have also taken a responsibility on that. They now set up COVID-19 at the local government levels, and they are constantly meeting. The security agencies have taken it more. They are also watching more. We have banned the use of Okada. We have banned the use of the tricycles, about conveying people, so that we'll be able to monitor people's movement, So we are taking a lot of other steps. The biggest of them also is the area of training and education. So we're using some of the local musicians, some of the local artists, some of the traditional rulers, and the rest of that to do a lot of education of our own people. So people will understand the dangers of this illness.
So much.
The good thing on
the NTA program now.
I don't know. There appears to be some interference with the governor's comments to us in response to the question we just asked. But regardless, we're taking a short break now. When we return, we'll look at the tweets and then return to our guests. All right, welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of Africa's largest television network. We are broadcasting, as always, from our Abuja headquarters studios. As we indicated before that short break, we have a number of tweets that have come in. So let's go over to the tweets now. Kirian, Bashiru tweets, to be honest, states are not doing much about observing the COVID-19 protocols, and enforcement of the lockdown is not strictly observed, and people are going about living their normal lives. It is not just the states. We also have to include the FCT.
Yeah.
So everywhere, and it's not a problem of the states, actually, problem of people themselves.
Nigerians themselves.
That's right.
Innocent Yawal, states will continue to suffer from testing deficit. Prevention and response is being threatened by lack of materials, even at the national level, since we refuse to look inward for supplies. We have all it takes to keep the virus at bay, but the Nigerian factor is a problem.
Now, Mike Ayakwo claims that some states are just apolitical with the COVID-19 issue. Some are totally confused with stopgap approach to finding reasonable solutions. There must be daily briefing on COVID-19 by state executives on this matter. In my state, Anambra, that is known for trading, the recent ease of lockdown was like letting the cat out of the cage. It was like everyone was on the street without respecting the tenets of or the protocols of COVID-19. There was a lot of vehicular and human movement. This is not good enough.
Omobola Babs, sadly, as of today, many states still continue business as usual. The actions of the state suggests a disbelief in the truism of COVID-19. So, in such states, there's virtually little or nothing visible going on in terms of sensitization and advocacy.
Now, Dada Stephen tweets that with the interstate lockdown on movement, it's still an open mystery why trucks laden with people were dispatched at other states 300 kilometers away. Yeah, this situation is worrisome.
Law Alpha C, here in Abuja, the state government, local governments and private individuals and companies are doing their best, but the problem remains the security agencies, particularly the police, who compromise guidelines at the borders.
Now, the Reverend Martin Akman, the states have shown genuine commitment in the fight against COVID-19, but they are being hampered by the sorry state of our health facilities and finance. So who's supposed to take up the health facilities in the first instance? Now, the lockdown has little or no effect as it is being flouted.
Samuel Hans, he said the current situation shows that states are not ready. Lagos State was fully prepared. I encourage other states to brace up and think out of the box. Actors should also come to the rescue of their states.
Dele Jack Solomon, it's now imperative for the northern governors to evolve viable measures to curtail COVID-19 in their respective states and do this in conjunction with the NCDC, traditional leaders, religious leaders, and other stakeholders.
Owoni Koko says interstate traveling should be allowed.
Should not.
Well, it should not be allowed. I was wondering, it should not be allowed.
Maybe take Akeju Alagbeju as well.
Yeah, Akeju says that the NCDC has limited resources and it's important for them to do the statistical analysis of data to prioritize interventions in the states within the African continent. We are below average in recovery and higher in death rate as compared with others on confirmed cases.
Emmanuel Bassi. Now, in Cross River State, there has been no reported case yet, but the health inspection teams are no longer on some of the streets, and a lot of persons no longer wear their mask. When I asked a certain keke driver why he was not wearing mask, he replied, the COVID-19 don't finish.
Emmanuel Bassi, well, that's incredible. Yes, Mutana Farouk, the spread of coronavirus is exponentially ascending the mountain. But the testing capacity is on the low pace. The swift response of the NCDC is luck, and the recuperation of the victims is relatively stagnant. Many people have complained that NCDC don't pick up the calls. Why?
Chris Simeon. Now, states like Anambra, Kebbi, Rivers, and Benue that have few cases, I really wish to commend the efforts of the governments of those states in fighting the coronavirus. For Kogi and Cross River that have no confirmed case or cases yet, kudos to them.
Festus Akimbewa, it's sad that after about 6 weeks of the outbreak of COVID-19 in our country, a coordinated response to the virus across all the states is still missing. We must remind our governors that we can only defeat the virus if we work together, learn from each other, and support each other.
Ibrahim Bello tweets, now to me most states still have a long way to go because the level of awareness is not high. I'm in love with what Akwa Ibom State is doing by involving the politicians, village heads, and even town criers in sensitization.
All right, Ibrahim Bello, the bitter truth is that a greater percentage of the commoners on the streets of our major cities, towns, and villages across the length and breadth of Nigeria are still not convinced that this pandemic is real. A lot more still has to be done. This responsibility should be inclusive, and that's the much that we can take on the tweets that we have at this moment. And Kingsley, you were itching to ask...
Yes, Atayekaro, I mean, there are probably some other things you want to tell us about what the task force is unraveling in terms of compliance with protocols or just observing, the proper regulations under the current circumstance. But I would also like you to respond to this. Listening to Professor Morris Iwu and Engineer Abdullahi Sule, who is the Executive Governor of Nasarawa, so they said something about how they are fishing out persons who have been smuggled or who have smuggled themselves back into their states in breach of the restriction on interstate movement, and they are relying on local intelligence that the neighborhoods or the neighbors themselves are the ones who are reporting and say, look, Mr. X or Kingsley just sneaked into town. He came in from Kano or he came in from Lagos. How much reliance are we seeing on local intelligence to fish out these persons who appear to be pouring into the Federal Capital Territory?
I think we need to be a little bit careful nationally. I said that yesterday, and we keep repeating it, so that we don't end up playing the world. When the world played in China, we looked at the virus as a Chinese problem, and everyone saw Chinese persons as stigma. They saw them as the virus itself. I know a day I had to be at Yanyan with a Chinese contractor on the road, and someone was telling me, don't go too close to him. That's coronavirus. Let's not paint a picture that everybody from the north or from Lagos is coronavirus. We are going to that point of stigma, because I got so many calls or people calling me to say, please come to this area in Sabonlugbe. Somebody just came from Kano. All of us here, we are finished. And I said, remember that even Abuja is also endemic. Even Abuja that we are is endemic. Even the Lugbe you are talking about, some patients have tested positive in your Lugbe. So don't paint a picture. Why we condemn interstate movement, following the orders of the commander-in-chief. We get those calls every time, every moment. We are going there and getting the persons, some of whom we are testing. And there are so many that we cannot keep all of them. Let's be very realistic with that, because the persons we saw yesterday coming with, what they call it now, Okada from Lagos, from Kanu, I think about half of them is for the FCT. Many of them are for Nasarawa State. If they go there, if we had allowed them to cross, because we took them back at night, at about after 7, we returned them after Zuma Rock. Please go back to where you are coming from. Somebody said we should quarantine them. I said we don't have that capacity. If we had been trying that, we would have gotten close to about 200,000 persons in the last 1 week. And we don't have. Let's not pretend, let's not lie over that. Not even Lagos State can do that. What we are saying here is, if we get that information, we check the persons. Some of them, we advise them to go into self-isolation. Don't come out. Some of them that we meet at the border post, we always turn them back. After we finish the one for those coming in from Kanu, Katsina, turning them back at Zuma Rock, we took some buses, returned them to Abaji. Those ones coming from Ondo and some other areas from the southwest. Please go back to where you are coming from. Go and stay there and wait. You can't be contravening that. When we get all of this, we look at it from a point where you are in a state, you must take an urgent decision. Yes, the governor was right, and I also raised the point, which I said when we had a council meeting, that I think, and I think the governor will agree with me, that local government, where we have Maraba, we have Maraba, one-man village, Ado, Masaka, Uke, down to almost close to Autaba Alefi. From my own point of view, I see them like the FCT, because more than half of NTA staff live there. They work in NTA. Both NTA National, where we are, and NTA Abuja, more than half live in Nasarawa State, and they must come to work. So if we are looking at it and we are cutting it from the boundary, that this is Nasarawa State, as the boundary is by boundary demarcation, then we are not being realistic. The governor raised that as well. Most of those there live, work in Abuja, and live in that.
So what is the policy implication or program implication?
The policy implication is that coming to work is difficult. Most of your staff are already trapped at the border point. We are filtering them to come in. They are checking them to come in. Some of them who are not there are being turned back. What the implication is that when we ought to tighten the grip after curfew, to filter persons who are coming in after curfew, we are filtering the ones who are us living there and coming to Abuja where we are to work.
So who then should, that's a very important point, I'm sure it's like you said, the Excellency will agree with you. What then should be the jurisdictional duty between these two locations? That's the boundary of the FCT, and if you say now we push it to just say the outer limits of curfew, should that be that of the presidential task force? Just hang on a second, let me so you take the question. Should that be the business of the presidential task force, which is federal government, or the FCT can then assume that responsibility, considering that Lafia is quite some distance away?
No, it should be that the governor of Nasarawa State, Engineer A.A. Sule, and the FCT Minister Malam Mohammed Musa Bello are very close, and they are working together. They've met severally on how to work, and this one as well should bring them back for greater synergy to also work together. The PTF is having the whole country to deal with. So narrowing them into FCT and Nasarawa will be like giving them too much of load. With that strong collaboration, the governor have raised that. Whether we like it or not, Nasarawa State, I cannot say what is happening here is not affecting them. A stronger collaboration, which I think they have, they would have been speaking on the phone. Once we have that established very strongly, then we can be checking from the other end while also filtering through Karo. Because for now, the greatest pressure we have is around the Nasarawa border. And the border is even beyond the Yanya checking point, as we call it. If you look at it, we have so many entry points. The point we can enter from is the old Karo Road, going to Karo Village. We can enter from Dagbana in Maraba, in Nasarawa State, into FCT Jukwe. We can enter from New Karishi. We can enter through that place into Orozo. We can enter from Pianco into Neville Estate. We can enter from very many areas into Abuja.
All right, Atai Harold, thank you. You have established your point, because you can hardly separate Nasarawa and Abuja,
In fact, a man's bedroom is in Nasarawa, the parlor is in FCT.
So that's just what has been established. Thank you. Professor Olufemi Babalola, I want to ask you a professional question, and that has to do with treatment of COVID-19. We hear now about remdesivir, which has been approved by the US, and I'm not sure this is right. I read also that Nigeria is about to start, the administration of remdesivir for treatment, because what we had from Gombe experience of those who are infected is that they just give them vitamin C every day, tell them to drink hot water and what have you. What would be your suggestion as a medical personnel, when it comes to this management? Because of course there's no specific drug globally, but we're using a kind of a treatment protocol, to see what we can achieve. Can we be specific about remdesivir or any other one that you may like to prescribe?
Well, there's something we call standard of care, in medical practice. And standard of care is based on the holistic experience of various practices in the management of patients. At the moment, I have to say that there is no universally accepted standard of care for COVID-19. Some people, advocate the use of, chloroquine, some hydroxychloroquine and Zithromax. Some advocate the use of lopinavir, ritonavir combination, which is what we are using in many of our isolation centers in Nigeria at the moment. And the Americans have come with this remdesivir, which they say is effective. As a matter of fact, there are other candidate drugs which are being investigated as we speak. Let me specifically mention ivermectin, which I have worked with severally. As we speak now, we are trying to start a trial of ivermectin in Lagos University Hospital. And this has been shown to have in vitro a 5,000 times reduction in the viral load of COVID-19, so shows a lot of promise. As a matter of fact, almost 1,000 people have been treated with ivermectin, and the fatality rate in people who are treated with ivermectin has been reduced by almost 10 times. So we cannot ignore such medications. So at the moment, there are still many candidates drugs that are showing promise, and the true efficacy of these drugs is going to only come out with time. I must say that remdesivir, from the way I'm looking at it, is not actually as efficacious as ivermectin. And the ironic thing about ivermectin is that this is a drug that we are familiar with in Nigeria, because we have used it to treat river blindness. About 165 million Africans have received ivermectin over the years. I would say at least 40% of that 165 million have been Nigerians.
Sorry, did you hear about Madagascar experience?
Yes, I heard about Madagascar experience as well, and I think they also have some candidate drugs that they're talking about. Let me tell you about the Senegal experience, where what they are using as their main treatment is hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine. They do a rapid test. Once you are positive, they put you on chloroquine. And their fatality rate is just about 14 out of about 1,000 and something. So there's something there.
Yeah. All right, that's a very important point you raised, Professor Babalola. Let's return to the governor of Nasarawa State, Engineer Abdullahi Sule. Your Excellency, I'm sure you listened to Atai Haro, who is chair of the FCT task force. The key point that he has raised has to do with increased collaboration between the FCT and your state, particularly on managing the, shall we say, the Nyanyan corridor. That rather than have, the outer limits of the FCT just at Nyanyan, we could then extend it to somewhere around Kefi, considering the population pressure on that axis into the FCT. What's your response to that? That's the first point. Second point, he also talked about the need for us to be wary about stigmatization of persons coming from some impacted areas and so on and so forth. But this is what we are saying. From anecdotal evidence, it would appear that the Almajiris are probably a high-risk group now for COVID-19 on account of their health status. What does this mean in terms of policy or program implication?
Well, you have asked 3 questions, and let me go with the last one so I don't forget it, because it's very important to all the northern governors. You see, yesterday, if you have listened to El Rufai, he said that he received Almajiris from 6 states so far. And they have tested them, because in Kaduna now they have a testing center. So, and all the states that he has received, Gombe, Nasarawa, and the rest of that, they have not found one with any COVID-19 symptoms or with that tested positive, except those that came from Kano. So you have to look at it that way. Now, going back to the first question that you asked, because that will answer the first question. When the gentleman from FCT was saying that stigmatization, which is also what you are asking, it's not about stigmatization. It is about identifying high risk. Even by the NCDC, they have categorized people into 3. The highest risk are those who are coming from those countries that are known to have COVID-19. That is the highest risk. That's number 1. Number 2 are those who have come in contact, with the people, who have COVID-19, who are already tested positive. The third category that they test are those who are showing symptoms. So you can see the way they categorize it. So whether we like it or not, actually it is an imported disease. It's something that is not known. It's something, all the people in Nasarawa that are actually that tested positive are people who came from any of those places. And he is right, perfectly right, when he said that, FCT is also that. But the unfair question to him was to say, what is being applicable in Nasarawa, can he apply it in FCT? Definitely not. If somebody is coming into, for instance, into Maitama, or into Asokoro, and you're just returning, who is there that is going to say this person, come, somebody is coming from Lagos, or is coming from there? And that is what brought the disease and made FCT also to have all the problems that it is having because they cannot stop anybody from coming. But you see, people like us, if you come to my village, nobody travels from my village to go to any America or anything like that. People don't even go to Abuja. People are sitting there. They go to their farms in the morning, come back in the evening. So such people, they will not have any kind of problem whatsoever unless somebody else that travels out brings it to them. So in that case, when they see somebody coming, it's not stigmatization. It is identifying the people who are bringing in, because those are the kind of people that bring these diseases. Now, the second question you asked about the relationship, which I think the gentleman from FCT also has mentioned, is the fact that we have to work together with FCT as far as Nasarawa is concerned, because there is no boundary, actually. If you look at it, there is absolutely no boundary between FCT and Nasarawa.
Your Excellency, the governor of Nasarawa State, we are going to pause you here because we have a time constraint. But you have actually made your point, and it's highly appreciated. And at this point, we'd like to thank you and appreciate you for sharing your time and your thoughts on this very important topic. Governor Abdullahi Sule, the governor of Nasarawa State, we thank you so much for being part of our show today.
Let the FCT minister. Thank you very much.
Okay, sir. And Professor Morrissey, we didn't have time to come back to you again because we ought to have discussed the issue of treatment, which, of course, Professor Babalola has started. Perhaps next time around, we'll engage you with that because you played a great role during the Ebola era that gave birth to Remdesivir, like we're talking about. I want to thank you for being a guest today on our program.
Thank you very much.
And back here in our studio, Atai Haro, Chairman, FCT Task Force on COVID-19. We thank you so much for coming. And it's also important to note that you can identify anybody who visits. That does not mean stigmatization.
No, you can identify, but let's just not paint it that it's one region of the country that is only endemic.
Exactly.
We all are endemic.
Exactly. And in one of the adverts on this program on the COVID-19, you said, look, the disease does not move. People move it.
That's true.
Yeah. All right. And also, Professor Olufemi Babalola, we thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much.
President Guild of Medical Directors.
All right, so that does it for us today on Good Morning Nigeria. As always, we appreciate your being with us. We are back tomorrow same time. That's 7 in the morning. Until then, as always, we urge that you observe the COVID-19 protocols, social distancing, and personal hygiene. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I am Kirian Umayo. Have a good day.